So instead of hard-coding name, favorite color, and age, let's get them out of the form. So how about we just grab each of these, stick them in here. Age is f.age value. So now instead of storing each of those values in variables, we add each of those values to this object. I think we can live without this now. Make sense? See how that does. All right. That seems to work. So creating a little data object out of the stuff that was in the form, and then we can do stuff with it. Now handle submit is a pretty simple little function. It grabs the stuff out of the form, passes it off to something that'll do some more work for us, and then adds it back to the page. So all together, this is doing quite a bit. It's all done in pretty small little chunks. But we still don't have our pretty color div. What can we do about that? This makes me very sad. What could we do? How can we do it using our outer HTML trick again? What if, instead of putting favorite color right here, what if we called render color, passing in the value? What would that get us? Let's just try if we're not sure. If you're not sure, just try. Okay, and we're back to favorite color, object HTML div element. Why? Because we're trying to convert that div to a string at some point. So where does this come from? What's putting that on the page? That's inside the list item, right? So it's probably inside render list item right here. So we're just putting that as a string inside text content. What if we just change text content here from to inner HTML? Is that any better? Not yet. No different, but what if this were favorite color, render color, blah 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 dot outer HTML? Whackity do. That works. So that's a lot happening on one line. So the value we pass in for favorite color, we pass in the actual color to render color, which gives us back an actual div, not a string containing the HTML of the div, but the actual div as a DOM node. Then we call outer HTML, to give us the HTML again. And still, render list would have just put the HTML right here if we hadn't used inner HTML here. So it's a step in the right direction. Ideally, we wouldn't be using inner HTML at all. But perhaps we can live with that for right now. Yep, render color creates the div and then sets the background color width and height and returns it at the end.
So what's bad about inner HTML? Just that you can't do anything with it afterwards? It's not...
I mean, once it's there, then it transforms into a real DOM node and you could manipulate it later. Basically, we're going to all the trouble of creating these nodes. It's silly to turn them back into HTML first. Performance is the short answer to your question. It's slower and less structured, a little harder to write reusable functions to build these things. For our purposes, it's probably a little harder than doing it the way that we did it like an hour ago, but we're learning more about DOM manipulation in the process. But if we're going to commit to doing it that way, we may as well just do it that way all the way down. But we will stop that here because it would get a little too complicated to try to eliminate this one. Yeah.
How frequently would you, like, under what circumstances would you recommend using anonymous functions? Because I know a guy at my work has been having to rewrite a lot of them just because they needed to be reusable and weren't.
So part of the key is, do they need to be reused? Part of it is, how complicated are they? And part of it is just plain contextual. Some things you always, in certain contexts, you always see anonymous functions. You see it a lot when you're calling map, because this is we're never going to need to do this exact thing ever again. So having these two lines right here isn't really any harder to understand than map, period. So over the course of the next 3 weeks, that may become a little clearer because we'll be doing both a lot. So hopefully it'll make more sense when we do and don't do that. Sometimes also it can help to give it a name if it's hard to tell what it's doing or why. Because if you give it a named function, then you have an opportunity to assign a name to that process, right? Like render list or handle submit. So it's obvious what that little chunk of code is doing because you've given it a name. So makes it easier to read. If over the course of the next 3 weeks that doesn't become any clearer, bring it back up. So worth a commit. Gosh, what was my last commit? Get log. Extract color div into a... Are you serious? It's been that long? Whoops. Extract list building into more functions. Slightly better commit message than do all the things.